Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Peace be upon you all, and welcome to this first episode of our new series, Daqiq al Kalam, Islam and Natural Philosophy, with Dr. Basil Al Ta'i. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Basil. How are you doing today, sir?
Wa alaikum salam. I am fine, Mr. Ahmed.
Ahlan wa sahlan. So, first of all, let's know a little bit about Dr. Al Ta'i. So, Dr. Muhammad Basil Al Ta'i is Emeritus Professor of Physics. He obtained his PhD from Manchester University in 1978 and has served 20 years at Iraqi universities and another 20 years at Yarmouk University in Jordan. He has published more than 50 science articles in topics of theoretical physics, like general relativity, black holes, and quantum cosmology. Dr. Altai has published 12 books, two of which are in English. The first one is God, Nature, and the Cause, and the second one is The Divine Word and the Grand Design. He has published also 200 popular articles in various intellectual fields of knowledge, mostly in science and religion. And since we are going to be talking about Daqiq al-Kalam, which is part of Kalam, so it's interesting to know that Professor Al-Tai has deep studies in Islamic Kalam and has written several articles in English and in Arabic about the Islamic philosophy of nature. His book, Daqiq al-Kalam, The Islamic Approach to Natural Philosophy, has been published in Arabic in two editions, and some good news is that the English translation of the book is ready to be published. He has been a guest speaker in many academic institutions and conferences around the world, and he is currently collaborating with the Theory Group at the Department of Physics and Astronomy at Leeds University in the United Kingdom as a visiting professor. And I would really recommend that every one of you would check out his channel, which you can find in the ticker. And Dr. Al-Ta'i, you are a specialist in this field, which is Kalam, and you are also a scientist of physics and a philosopher of science in this field. So I'm really interested to learn from you to understand our heritage and how Islam and science are connected. So Dr. Al-Tai has a presentation for us. In this presentation, he is going to address today an introduction about what is Kalam, and then we have a roadmap together of 10 episodes where we are going to unfold the topic of Daqiq al-Kalam to understand the relation between our heritage, our Islam, the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his divine word, Al-Quran, and how this relates to nature and science and natural philosophy. So today in his presentation, he is going to talk to us about introductory topics. We are going to understand what is Kalam, the reasons for the rise of Kalam. We are going to be introduced to the schools of Kalam, to the sources and methodology of Kalam, what are the topics that Kalam addresses, and what are the arguments that Kalam uses. And so without further ado, Dr. Basil, let's get to know more about this interesting topic from you. So the stage is yours.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you for this initiative of presenting such an important subject, which you once called the jewel of Islamic thought. I really appreciate that term because what you have said is exactly describing the value of Daqiq al-Kalam, especially. But in general, Kalam is much wider scope. I am actually concentrating on the portion of Kalam which we can deal with concerning the properties of the natural world and the laws of the natural world. This is what was called Daqiq al-Kalam. However, one may ask, basically, what is Kalam? In Arabic, Kalam means speech or a sequence of words. And in the intellectual context, it means a dialogue or a discourse, say. In its philosophical context, it means it is actually a collection of concepts, assumptions, principles, and problems that are used to explain the relationship between the divine, between God, the human, and the physical world, according to the basics of the Islamic belief, Islamic creed. So this is actually, this is, you can say, what's Kalam. Classically, Kalam was considered also where it is used, where it applies. It is used actually to as a foundation for the Islamic jurisprudence, which in turn constitutes the base of Islamic Sharia laws. Why is that? Because Sharia laws in Islam are a deductive system. It's not only the narrations, it's not only the narrations from the Prophet Muhammad or from the Quran that constitute Sharia. It is the deduction of the fuqaha, the scholars of Islam. And this is very important because in this case, the deductive systems obeys rules and principles that needs logical foundations, in addition to the sacred narrations to be in order to be fully justified and established. This is the importance, this is the real distinction between Islamic Sharia law and other religious instructions in other religions.
Yeah.
The question arises: why Kalam? What motivated Muslims to get into such a thought? Historically, there were two motivations actually for the emergence of Kalam. The first was internal, which is concerned with rationalizing the theological view within an Islamic frame of understanding and answer the main questions raised against the basics of Islamic belief. The second reason was the emergence of Kalam was motivated actually by the reaction of Muslims with ideas and thoughts and philosophies of the nations, nearby nations in Mediterranean, for example, the Greeks and the Hindu. Also, they have their own religions and philosophies. And there were many debates which were held between Muslims and Greeks and Muslims and Hindu in a wider scope. And this which has led at the time to the dialogue between civilization rather than the clash of civilizations, which we sometimes hear about in this age.
So today, because of at least the second reason, Kalam and Daqiq al-Kalam are actually well needed because Islam is now talking to everybody and everybody is talking to and about Islam also.
Indeed. Yeah. Especially, as I said, when we recognize the fact that Kalam is based on rational reasoning, rational arguments.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is supported. It is in the background, in the silent background. You have the Islamic narrations, the Islamic Quran, but this is only in the silent background. So I can say that Kalam was intended to serve two fields: Islamic jurisprudence and the worldview of Islam, providing the basis for natural philosophy, as we will see during these 10 episodes.
All right.
Yes. Then we should also know, for the start, that there were several schools of Kalam. The first school, which was formed in Basra, were called Mu'tazila. It was Mu'tazila. It was formed by Wasil ibn Ata, who died 748. Yeah, that's the 8th century AD. So you have to notice so early.
So early, yeah.
That, yes, that Kalam arises. And then we have the Ash'arite school, which was formed by Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, who died about 200 years later, 935. Yet, in fact, a third school, on a smaller scale, the Maturidis, grew in Samarkand and Khurasan. Khurasan is partly Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and the north of Afghanistan. This is Khurasan.
Okay. All right.
The school followed the Hanafi teaching, Abu Hanifa, because Abu Hanifa was perhaps one of the first mutakallimun, practitioners of Kalam. He wrote a book, well-known book, Al-Fiqh Al-Akbar, the great or the big fiqh. Also, one thing important, Mr. Ahmed, to notice is that all schools of Kalam agree almost on the views presented on issues of Daqiq al-Kalam, but they differ on the question of Jalil al-Kalam. We will explain now
The difference.
Jalil al-Kalam and Daqiq al-Kalam. The theological questions related to the divine attribute and the deeds of a human being were the issues where Mu'tazila has differences with the Ash'ari and Maturidi. This culminated in the problem of creation of the Quran, where Mu'tazila said that the Quran is temporal, meaning that it was revealed in temporal order, in accordance with the needs and events taking place during revelation. Ash'arite says no. The Quran is the word of the divine. It is the word of God. You cannot say it is temporal. It has to be eternal. It has to be eternal. But here, I mean, this is actually the main difference. In order to explain what we mean by دقيق الكلام and جليل الكلام, traditionally متكلمون started with questions related to theological issues, which are bases of the Islamic creed. Yes. Yeah. For example, the divine attributes, uniqueness of God, Tawheed, and that's why Kalam was called Ilm al-Tawheed. Yeah, the science of Tawheed, uniqueness.
Okay, interesting.
Power of God, nature of His knowledge, questions related to the afterlife, including punishment and reward, question of whether the sins has to be dealt with as a kafir or not a kafir. Is he believer or not believer? All these concerns were called, or this point were Jalil al-Kalam. which means stateful kalam.
Okay.
On the other hand, the mutakallimun confronted beliefs of other nations, like, as I said, Greeks and Hindus. They found the need to consider the ontological questions. The world and its purpose, what is the physical nature, how cause and effect work, etc., etc. Nature of force, what force means, what gravity means, what matter is consists of, and all physical properties, etc. These questions which is concerning the natural philosophy, they were called daqiq al-kalam, which means delicate kalam. I should admit that in the original books of mutakallimun, which we read, early mutakallimun, we should know that these daqiq and jalil comes together on many occasions. There are no books for daqiq and books of jalil. It was my job to classify daqiq in one section and jalil in another section. Although they have mentioned these terms, mutakallimun have mentioned these terms. Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari and even the Mu'tazilite mentioned daqiq and jalil.
All right.
As for the sources and methodology of kalam, we should also learn that mutakallimun consider the Quran as the main source for deducing knowledge about the world.
Okay.
They know that exactly. They know that the Quran is not a book of science. They admit that. But at the same time, they feel that the Quran provides you with science, with directions to contemplate properly about the nature, a nature in which God is present. That's why you see Professor William Craig, which you have hosted in one or two episodes before, devised the so-called Kalam cosmological argument. And as we will see later, that now we are devising a new Kalam cosmological argument, which is in a wider scope than the Craig argument. Obviously, it is good to recognize that. And I really, when I read the book of William Craig, I feel the applicability of what he's saying, which is borrowed from Kalam, and the applicability in contemporary physics. In their understanding of the world, the mutakallimun started, the philosophers started from the world through reason, the intellect, to devise God.
A theory for God, let's say.
A theory for, or a description. Mutakallimun followed exactly the other approach.
The other way around. So they start from God.
The other way around. I hope it's correct in the slide, because it seems to me it is the other way around actually in the slide. So I apologize for that. The Mutakallimun started from the Quran, that is the divine revelations, through the intellect, the mind, the reason, to understand the world. You see, it's just opposite for the philosopher. Effectively,
so for the philosophers, the fundamental reality is the material world. For
right.
Muslims, the fundamental reality is God, and the rest is
That's right.
deduced from his revelation. Yeah.
That's right. Let us not mix. That's why the mutakallimun, the practitioners of kalam, differ decisively from
Obvious.
Muslim philosophers. So you
Yes.
should not say that Ibn Sina was a mutakallim, for example. No, Ibn Sina was a philosopher. Why? Because the Muslim philosophers followed the Greeks, actually. They
Yeah.
were disciples of the Greek.
Hmm.
And it's true, they haven't added any original thing. They tried to reconcile the Greek philosophy with Islam. But when it comes to mutakallimun are the original Muslim speakers or thinkers who are expressing the Islamic view. Well, the argument of kalam. The arguments in philosophy has been defined by the philosopher Ibn Rushd, who was, by the way, a good student of and a sincere student of Aristotle and the Greek philosophy in general. And he defended Aristotle strongly. He divided the arguments into three types, and these are correct. Rhetoric, this is a linguistic sort of lingual construct achieving some convincing argument. Rhetoric, khatabi.
Yeah. So rhetoric is balagha, using constructs of language. Yeah.
The rhetoric is not very much appreciated, by the way, in philosophy. But then we have the dialectic argument, which contains some, we find the demonstrations, for example. These are types of argument that has been used by the mutakallimun, mostly, correct, which is based on logic. It's based on logic and logical arguments. And then you have the demonstrative. And by the way, what is always said about Aristotle following demonstrative is a proof, like what you find in geometry, for example. Geometry, you can prove that two triangles will have the same, for example, area, etc., if they have such and such properties. This is demonstrative, yes, correct. But Aristotle philosophy is not demonstrative. Aristotle's and the Greek philosophers' arguments are not demonstrative. Although nowadays we hear people saying that Aristotle was demonstrative. He was not this way. He was almost dialectic.
Yeah, always using logical arguments and thought experiments, etc.
Exactly. Yeah. And his thought experiments are also based on, things which are not based on assumptions, actually.
Yeah.
Which are not scientific.
Yeah.
In today's measure, in today's knowledge, we will see that mutakallimun offered a great deal of knowledge through their works. In the next episode, obviously, I will talk more about the relation between philosophy and
kalam. So I think this was a brief introduction for everybody about what is kalam. It's essentially the methodology used by Muslim thinkers to start from the divine and then infer things about the world, and would call that Daqiq al-Kalam. And then Jalil al-Kalam is actually thinking about the divine himself. And also Dr. Ta'i explained to us today the reasons mainly to put fundamentals, logical fundamentals for jurisprudence, and also to be able to talk to other cultures that did not believe in our revelation. So the dialogue, I think it's very applicable to today, where atheists would tell you, talk to me with logic, talk to me with something that has a common denominator between us, because we do not believe in Quran and Hadith already. So you need to start from a common denominator. And then he talked to us about the schools, which started by Mu'tazila, but then even Ash'aris were like an internal revolution against I'tizal from the inside, and then it became a school, and then Maturidis also came, and I don't think there is any Mu'tazilas today, Doctor, right? It's not there.
Mu'tazila has evaporated, as I will explain in the second.
Yeah, so people do not need to worry about the dialogue between Mu'tazila and Ash'ari and Maturidi anymore. They need to think about the dialogue between Islam and non-Islam, maybe.
That's right.
Yeah, and then Dr. Attai also talked to us about the sources and the methodology, sources being primarily the Quran and logical reasoning, and then the methodology would be either linguistic constructs or logical constructs or demonstrative constructs. And then those are the and then he talked about the topics that which is daqiq and jalil, and the arguments which we just mentioned, the rhetoric and the dialectics and the demonstrative. I think this was a brief but yet concise, let's say, explanation. So thank you for that. And everyone, please join us in the after show, and be sure to join us. Next time we'll be addressing topics like philosophy and kalam, what happened to make kalam banned, the revival of kalam, and contemporary reformation of kalam, which is something that Dr. Attai himself is trying to contribute in this age that needs both faith, logic, and science to walk hand in hand to take people to their redemption. Thank you very much, Dr. Basil, for this informative session. This was Dr. Basil Attai teaching us about Kalam, and myself, Ahmed Ishra, of Finding Truth. Thank you, everyone, and please join us in the after show. If you have questions, put it to us in the comment section, and peace be upon you all, and see you soon next week.